Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, guys. This is Trev from Trevessence, and this morning we are going to continue with the reading of the book of Esther. All right. I want to say welcome to everybody who is in the chat. Welcome to everybody who is going to come into the chat afterwards. I want to say a very special welcome to the newbies, the new people I've met online, the new people who have decided to subscribe to the channel. I I didn't even know that so many people would be interested in the Bible. I know people are always saying, "Oh, the Bible says this, the Bible says that, the Bible says the other," and the majority of us believe that we believe in the Bible, but we never take the time out to read it for ourselves. And I think something is wrong with that because there's no way you can tell me that you believe a book that you have never read. So you're just going by tradition to say, oh, yes, I believe in the Bible, but you ain't never spent the time to read it. So because you haven't spent the time to read it, I'm going to be reading it for us. So come along with me. Come along with me and let me read for you. If you just can't be bothered, you don't like reading, or you just can't be bothered with all this reading, you can't be bothered. I can be bothered. So I will be bothered with reading it. And all you have to do is listen. If you have your book Bible or your Google Bible, though, you can follow along and make notes as we go along. So join me over here on my channel every morning around this time for the reading of the Bible. We have been going from book to book, and now we are on the book of Esther. Now, I was always told that the book of Esther was very interesting, but after reading just the first chapter yesterday, I believe it is more than just interesting. It is phenomenal. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. By just starting to read the book of Esther, I realized that woman rebellion is nothing new. Women rebellion started back in the day with Queen Esther, because we have read, Queen Vashti. We have read before of women presenting their case to the men, because remember, it's the patriarchal society that was established then is what exists now, and women have been fighting for years to get a seat at the table, to be able to work outside the home, to be able to make decisions for themselves rather than wait for a husband to tell them what to do, when to move, and how to move. Women have had to fight to have spaces for themselves. Even though, if you look at today's society, there are some people who are trying to take those spaces away from women. But anywho, that's not what we're going to talk about. We're not going to talk about that today. We're not going to inject that into what we are doing this morning. But women have had to fight for equality just to be even recognized as a woman, to be recognized as a human being with rights and responsibilities and individuality, and being able to make their decisions on their own. Women have had to fight over the years just for those simple things. And so we see here in the book of Esther, we read chapter 1 yesterday, and we saw how the Queen Vashti denied the king, how Cyrus, he wasn't pleased. He was not pleased. The king sent to call you, and you blatantly decides that you ain't going. Yeah, I ain't going. I don't have to jump when you say jump. You were having a big celebration, a party, where you invited all the noblemen, all the kings and princes and other noblemen around to come celebrate with you. So guess what? I'm going to be having a party myself. And this party is for all the women around. And that's what Vashti did. When King Ahasuerus was having his show-off party, I call it, because he had invited all the people around, all the men, not all the people now, all the noblemen around to show off his great kingdom. Because you see, he ruled all the way through India, all the way over into Ethiopia. He ruled a vast area, so vast that when he was showing it off, it took him 180 days. That's a half of a year. It took him to show off his vast kingdom to the nobles that he had invited to come look. And at this point in his showing off, he wanted to show off Queen Vashti as well to his nobles. Say, look at her. She's so beautiful. And when he sent for Queen Vashti, she was like, no, I ain't going. He wasn't happy. And so what his closest confidants realized that he was not happy that Queen Vashti had defied him. And so there was one called Memucan, and Memucan decided that, well, you know what, king, you are the king. Queen Vashti is a woman. She ain't got no business defying you. How could she do that? Well, guess what? You have the power, so you can make a law that will ensure that neither her nor any other woman around here commit such an offense. And so Memucan suggested to the king that he made a law that says that women were not allowed to defy their men. You're not allowed to defy your man. Your man calls, you better get up and run. Your man says jump, you better get up and jump. So Memucan encouraged King Ahasuerus to pass this law, because he says, when you see Queen Vashti defy you like that, it wasn't just her defying you. She is encouraging, by her doing this, she is encouraging all the other women around here to defy their man. And that we cannot have, because that is going to cause a lot of problems in our society. And we cannot have that. So you have to make a law that says these women, no woman can defy their husband, can defy a man. And if they do, they will be punished. You ever wondered why society has why there are all these laws? I know that there has to be laws, because where there is no law, people perish. You can't have free for all and people just doing as they please, just doing as they will, because people, they will do and do and do. You can't have a society like that. There has to be laws, and oftentimes laws come about based on experiences and outcomes and revisions. So there's an experience, there's an outcome. You look back at it, you say, well, there has to be a revision for this. So we have to revise our approach to a situation like this. And so that is how new laws are brought up. And laws get changed too because they get challenged. We talk about Zelophehad, the woman, Zelophehad, the man who had 5 daughters, he didn't have any son. But the law said that for anyone to inherit what you had, it had to go to your son. And Zelophehad had no sons, only daughters. So Moses was distributing Zelophehad's wealth to his brethren rather than to his daughters. And the daughters was like, well, you know, I mean, he doesn't have any sons. And if the law says it should go to his children, it should go to his sons. But we are women, but why sons? Why we can't get the land? Why we can't get the belongings of our father? He didn't have any son, he just didn't have any sons. And they took their case to Moses, and Moses met with the elders, and Moses said, you know what? She's right. They are right. We're going to give them their father's inheritance. He doesn't have any sons, and too bad he didn't have any sons, but he has daughters. We'll give it to them. And so that was one change in the law right there. Moses revised the law and changed the law that these women could inherit their father's possessions because their father had no sons. We have seen where Deborah was a ruler of Israel, short-lived, but anyway, she was a ruler nonetheless. You know, we have seen where the Bible has not been consistent in, say, its recognition of women, because we saw Deborah ruling and we didn't see any opposition. We didn't see anybody say, how dare her. But then we saw Miriam, Moses' sister, and Aaron, his brother, confronting Moses about Moses not obeying his own laws. Because remember, Moses' law said the people could not marry outside. They had to marry amongst themselves. As descendants of Abraham, they had to marry amongst themselves. This was Moses' law for them. But Moses was married to a whole Ethiopian. A whole Ethiopian woman that he had met down there in Egypt. He had married. And yet, he was the one, quote unquote, chosen to lead the people into the promised land. And he was the one who was discouraging the people from ever marrying anyone who was not a descendant of Abraham. A descendant, you know, they're married to their cousins and just marrying amongst themselves. So here you are telling everybody, oh, you are not supposed to marry outside of us. We are supposed to intermarry around here. No strangers should come in. But then you stand up there telling this, and you stand up there punishing people for marrying or dating or doing anything that you deemed to be sinful. Yet you were married to a whole Ethiopian, and Aaron and Miriam dared to question Moses about that. And what happened? The people who were with them, the earth swallowed them up, and Miriam was struck with leprosy. That was her punishment for having had the audacity to ask Moses any questions. And then Aaron was spoken to sternly about him having been questioning Moses. So we see these inconsistencies, and I say, why Miriam was struck with leprosy for that, but Aaron wasn't. So you see, there has been this disdain for women coming from even back then, and it has prevailed even into today's society. And at the current moment, there is an intense conversation going on about what is a woman, and this conversation has been heating up over the last few years. And at this moment, that conversation is it's so divisive. I am even astounded that such a question could even be asked. And we see men coming to hijack womanhood to say they are women and we are, I don't know, chest feeders. The audacity, the absolute audacity. But as women, I believe that we shouldn't even be fighting for our identity. We shouldn't even be fighting for our identity, but here we are in 2023, fighting like the Dickens and being denied the right to be called women by some men. So the men are just twisting the patriarchy in another direction, but it is still the patriarchy. Anywho, we are going to be continuing with the reading of the Bible today. We are going to be continuing the reading of the book of Esther. So if you are here, come along with us. Get your book Bible or your Google. Oh, Delia! Family is here. What's up, Delia? How are you, my sweetheart? How are you, my love? Oh my gosh. What time for you now, Delia? But 11 o'clock in the morning now for you, huh? Yes, Sister Delia. I'm telling you, my love. It is it is just absolutely ridiculous, if you ask me. Absolutely ridiculous. But we are moving on. But before we move on, let me just remind you all, dear, that we do not endorse any particular religion or any particular denomination on this channel. What we do is simply read the Bible. We're reading the Bible for ourselves so that we can be aware of its contents rather than continue to be told what is in the Bible. We will have knowledge for ourselves of what exactly is in the Bible. Because if you all will agree with me, those of you who would have been here with me for the last year or two would know that the Bible is the most interesting book. The most interesting book. It's just that we ain't been spending the time to read it for ourselves. So come along, guys. Get your book Bible or your Google Bible, whichever one you have close by, and come with me. Let us continue reading the book of Esther. Let us begin. We are on to the book of Esther, chapter 2. Esther chapter 2. After these things, now the things they're talking about is after Vashti defied King Ahasuerus, and per Memucan, he encouraged King Ahasuerus to put into law that women should not defy men. And he sent this law all over the region to all the kings and governors and everybody to make them aware that this is the new law. that women will now be punished if they ever dare to defy their man. Chapter 2. After these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus was appeased, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what was decreed against her. Because remember, they even stripped Vashti. Memo can even encourage Ahasuerus to strip Vashti of her crown and give it to somebody more deserving. I mean, give it to a yes woman. Give it to a woman who will jump when you say jump. Give it to a woman who will never defy you, who is timid, who doesn't have that audacity, who doesn't have that kind of cojones to defy you. Give it to that woman. Vashti don't deserve it. Verse 2. Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, let there be fair young virgins sought for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather together all the fair young virgins unto Shushan the palace, to the house of the women, unto the custody of Heg the king's chamberlain, keeper of the women. And that Heg is Hege. And let their things for purification be given them. They're going to be gathering up virgins and bring. Andrea, how are you doing? So good to see you, my love. Happy Wednesday. I can't believe it's Wednesday already, but it is. Happy Wednesday to you, my love. Hope you're having a great morning. Verse 4. And let the maiden which pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. So, now they are stripping Vashti of her position. They are getting a young virgins now for the king. And the king is going to pick amongst the young virgins someone that is, quote unquote, more deserving of the position than Vashti is, someone who will not defy the king. Let's see what happens. And the thing pleased the king, and he did so. Now, in Shushan, the palace, there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjaminite. Verse 6. Who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity which had been carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. So this is kind of strange, because I don't remember when we were reading that there was a king of Judah named Jeconiah. We're going to revisit that. So I just put a little question sign here, so that after the reading, I will go and look into that, because why does this sound strange? Why does this name sound odd? But anywho, we will continue. When you come into the live, guys, don't forget to hit the like button. Thank you so much, and share out the stream. Thank you so much. Invite your friends to come in. And we know that it is time to celebrate Jamaica's. Yesterday, Jamaica celebrated Emancipation Day. And even though I'm reading the Bible, guys, I wanted to say, I know a lot of people thought that Emancipation Day was Emancipation Day for all the slaves. But did you know that emancipation, the proclamation of the emancipation, was not for everybody? Did you all know that? It was for everybody under the age of 6. Tell me, no, not believe it. It was for everybody under the age of 6. Under the age of 6. Everybody else had to continue working for another 4 years, quote unquote, so that the masters could recoup some of their money. So they had to be working for free, so the masters could recoup some of their money. Yeah, look it up. Anywho, that's not what we're talking about. But when you're talking about slavery, everything goes, because look at this in the book of Esther, where King Ahasuerus is starting to make laws that's going to keep women underfoot, to keep women as slaves to men. Let us continue. Verse 5 of chapter 2 of the book of Esther. Now in Shushan, the palace, there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjaminite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity which had been carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. And he brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter. So it is Mordecai and Hadassah. Let's continue. And he brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. So Hadassah was an orphan. And the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter. I was waiting to hear them say he married her, but it says here that Mordecai took her for his own daughter. Verse 8. So it came to pass, when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan, the palace, to the custody of Hegai. I believe this is the same Hegai. Now they spell it Hegai. I'm just going to circle that because I'm going to take a look at it to see if that's the same person, because up here in verse 3 it says that the custody of Hegai. Hegai was the king's chambermaid. And down here in verse 8 it talks about Hegai again, but it's spelled now Hegai. Okay, she was brought up to the custody of Hegai, that Esther was brought also unto the king's house, to the custody of Hegai, keeper of the women. And up here in chapter 3 it says Hegai, the king's chambermaid, keeper of the women. So it's the same Hegai they're talking about, but they have spelled it differently. But apparently it's the same person who is the keeper of the women. Can you imagine? The women had to have a keeper. Can you believe that? So the women had to have somebody to watch them, somebody to ensure that they stayed in the right path, that they did the right thing. The women were like chickens. They had to have somebody oversee them. Imagine that, huh? But anyway, let us continue the reading. And verse 9. And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness from him, and he speedily gave her things for purification, with such things as belonged to her, and 7 maidens, which were meet to be given her. I'm not sure why they wrote it like that, but that meet is MEET, as in you meet somebody. Out of the king's house, and he preferred her and her maids unto the best place of the house of the women. So here, Hadassah, or Esther, she was called, is being given this preferential treatment because the king loved her. She was fair, she was beautiful, he loved her. And so Hege, who was the keeper of the women, Hege's responsibility in the palace of Shushan was to ensure that she was taken care of. His responsibility was for the women, to ensure that the women had what they needed, and the women stayed in line, if you know what I mean. That was his responsibility. He was the keeper of the women, the overseer of whatever the women did. That was his job. And he loved Hadassah, or Esther as she was called. He thought she was fair. He loved her, and so he was making sure that she was comfortable. Jojo is here. Joseph, what's up? Good morning, my love. How are you doing? So good to see you. Welcome into the live, my friends. Welcome. Let us continue. Verse 10. Esther had not showed her people nor her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her that she would not show it. So here now, Esther, or Hadassah, however you call her, she did not tell them that she was a Jew. Mordecai had instructed her, do not dare reveal to anybody that you are a Jew. Do you think the king, Ahasuerus, would approve of her knowing she was a Jew? No, I don't think he would. So she had to hide the fact that she was a Jew. And Mordecai walked every day before the court of the women's house to know how Esther did and what should become of her. So Mordecai passed by the house every day because he wants to know, he wants to make sure that Esther is okay. So, like a sneaky little man, he just pretending as though he don't know what's going on. I'm just a little old man passing by. But what he's in fact doing is trying to make sure his ears are wide open, his eyes are wide open, trying to see what's going on with Esther. Verse 12. Now when every maid's turn was come to go in to King Ahasuerus, after that she had been 12 months, according to the manner of the women. For so were the days of their purification accomplished. 12 months, a whole year. To wit, 6 months with oil and myrrh, and 6 months with sweet odors, and with other things for the purification of the women. So you hear that? So this is how the women were purified before they would go into the king. For 6 months. They had to be washed with oil of myrrh. And for another 6 months, they had to be washed with sweet odors. What is there about a woman that needed to be purified before she could go into the king? So you see, with how much disdain they treated women. Let us continue, verse 13. Then thus came every maiden unto the king. Whatsoever she desired was given her to go with her out of the house of the women unto the king's house. So now, after the year of purification, or you stay in the house with the women, where all the women are, and you get your purification, them wash you down with oil and all these things. And then after a year of being washed down and purified, so to speak, then you are allowed to move out of the house of the women to go into the king. Let us continue. Verse 14. In the evening she went, and on the morrow, that means the next day, she returned into the second house of the women to the custody of Shashgaz, the king's chambermaid, which kept the concubines. She came in unto the king no more, except the king delighted in her, and that she were called by name. Now, when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her for his daughter, was come to go in unto the king, she required nothing but that Hege, the king's chambermaid, the keeper of the woman, appointed, and Esther obtained favor in the sight of all them that looked upon her. Let's read that again. We're going to read again from verse 14. In the evening she went, and on the morrow, that's the next day, she returned into the second house of the women to the custody of Shashgaz, the king's chambermaid, the king's chamberlain, which kept the concubines. So Hege was in charge of one house that kept the women, and Shashgaz was in charge of another house that kept the concubines. So here Esther has gone now to the house of the concubines. She came in unto the king no more, except the king delighted in her, and that she were called by name. Now when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her for his daughter, was come to go in unto the king, she required nothing but that Hege, the king's chamberlain, the keeper of the women, appointed, and Esther obtained favor in the sight of all them that looked upon her. Everybody liked Esther. They thought she was beautiful. They thought she was dignified. So everybody liked her. So Esther was taken unto King Ahasuerus into his house royal in the 10th, into his house royal in the 10th month, which is the month Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. So Esther was the person who replaced Vashti. Now remember, they were angry at Vashti because they were angry at Vashti because Vashti had the audacity to defy the king. And after Vashti defied the king, the plot was put into place to ensure that none of the women around would be able to defy their man anymore. And they also wanted to replace Vashti with another beautiful and fair queen. Now here, Esther is being crowned the queen, and the role is taken away from Vashti. Let us continue. Guys, follow along with me in your book Bible or your Google Bible, whichever one you have. Go ahead and follow along with me as we continue this reading. Verse 18. Then the king made a great feast unto all his princes and his servants, even Esther's feast. And he made a release to the provinces, and gave gifts according to the state of the king. And when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai sat in the king's gate. Esther had not yet showed her kindred nor her people. Now she had not yet revealed that she was a Jew, as Mordecai had charged her. For Esther did the commandment of Mordecai, like as when she was brought up with him. So Esther grew up with Mordecai. She practiced Judaism. But she did not reveal to anybody there that she was in fact a Jew. And now now that she's queen, she still has to practice her Judaism, and she can't reveal herself. Sean, what's up? How you doing, family? Good to see you. Good to see you. Hope you're having a great Wednesday morning, my love. Let us continue. Verse 21. In those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, two of the king's chamberlains, Bigthan and Teresh, of those which kept the door, were wroth. That means they were angry, seeing Mordecai sitting at the king's gate, and sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. And the thing was known to Mordecai. Who told it unto Esther the queen, and Esther certified the king thereof in Mordecai's name. So Mordecai heard the plot, heard that they were plotting against the king, and he told Esther. And Esther told this to the king. You know, there's always a little mole. Sometimes even in our lives, we have a mole in our lives. You know, either a mole that is taking out information, getting a front seat in our lives so they can get the information and dispense it around to people who we would rather not know our business. But let us continue. Welcome into the live, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming. We are reading from the book of Esther. So if you are here and you have your book Bible or your Google Bible, follow along with us. Verse 22 of chapter 2 says, And the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it unto Esther the queen, and Esther certified the king thereof in Mordecai's name. Verse 23, and this is the last verse of chapter 2. And when inquisitions was made of the matter, it was found out, therefore they were both hanged on a tree, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles before the king. I don't remember reading that in the book of Chronicles. Do y'all remember reading that? I didn't even remember these men's names. Bigthan and Teresh. Mm, I don't even remember those names. But anyway, it is what it says. Bigthan and Teresh, they were keepers of the door. They were plotting against the king. And so Mordecai, who sat at the gate of the palace, heard the plot and told it to Esther, who told it to the king. And so the king ordered the hanging of Bigthan and Teresh. Courtian, oh, how are you doing, my love? Good to see you. Happy Wednesday to you. I hope you're having a great morning. Good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Let us continue. We are reading the book of Esther. So far, it is a very interesting book. We are on to chapter 3. After these things, chapter 3 of the book of Esther. After these things, did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him, and set his seat above all the princes that were with him, and all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai refused to bow, nor did him reverence. Then the king's servants which were in the king's gate said unto Mordecai, Why are you transgressing against the king's commandment? Now it came to pass when they spake daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. So here the king had appointed Haman. The king had appointed Haman to some noble position, and everybody was supposed to bow to Haman. Now Mordecai refused. And everybody wanted to know, so why are you refusing to bow to Haman? This is the king's order. Everybody got to follow the king's order. So why are you refusing to bow to Haman? I am bow to no man. Mordecai says, I am bow to no man. Now listen, I'm a Jew. I'm not going to be bowing to this man. So they told the king, because they wanted to see, what is the king gonna do what's the king gonna do to Mordecai? Verse 5 says, And when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow, nor did him reverence, he was full of anger. And he sought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had showed him the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai. Ain't that something? Ain't that something? So because the people refused to bow to him, because Mordecai refused to bow, he has sought for Mordecai to be punished for it. And so he wanted all the people, all the Jews, because he knows that once one Jew isn't bowing, the others aren't going to be bowing either. So he didn't want this problem on his hands. And that is one thing I noticed, that the back then those societies were very intolerant of social disturbances. They did not tolerate any form of social disturbance. It's either you dare to do or you dare to die. You are going to follow the social order, or else. You cannot be in this society without following the social order. That was the order of the day back then. So everybody was bound to follow because of fear of the punishment. And the punishment is usually DEATH. So you can imagine how petrified the people were. No wonder they followed like sheep. Let us continue. Verse 7. In the first month, that is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pur, that's P-U-R, that is the lot, before Aman from day to day, and from month, to the 12th month, that is the month Adar. And Aman said unto King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people of all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people, neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore, it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business, to bring it into the king's treasuries. So here, the people he's talking about are the Jews, right? So Haman is presenting to the king that, listen, there are some people around here who are causing disturbance. They are a certain people who do not bow, do not believe that they should bow to this king. They are practicing their own religion around here. We have to get rid of those people because they are a threat. They are a threat to our existence. We don't want any opposition around here. It's either you obey, it's either you are with us or you're not. And if you are not, we are going to eliminate you. We don't want any opposition. Let's see what the king says. And the king took his ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. And the king said unto Haman, the silver is given to thee, the people also, to do with them as it seems good to thee. So here the king give him permission. Say, listen, you have permission to do with these people as you see fit. Then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day of the first month, and there was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenants, and to the governors that were over every province, and to the rulers of every people of every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language. In the name of King Ahasuerus was it written, and sealed with the king's ring. Okay. So when they make a new law, they have to send out letters to all the provinces. It's like the president makes a law there in the White House, and once it is signed, it is dispersed amongst all the states, all the governors, so that everybody is aware of the new law, because everybody is bound to obey the new law. Verse 13. And the letters were sent by post into all the king's provinces, to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. On the 13th day of the 12th month. The 12th month is the month of Adar. That's when it was ordered for the Jews, all the Jews, to be to be slaughtered. Imagine that. Imagine that. Let us continue. And you see, the plan is to do unto the Jews like we have been reading that how the children of Israel had acquired all of their wealth. How they had acquired all of their wealth by slaughtering whole communities and taking everything that is of value that they had. Now here the king has ordered that every Jew, young and old, needed to be slaughtered, and all their spoils, everything they had of value, was to be taken. Let's see what happens next. The copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, that they should be ready against that day. The post went out, being hastened by the king's commandment, and the decree was given in Shushan the palace. And the king and Aman sat down to drink, but the city Shushan was perplexed. Why do you think the city of Shushan was perplexed? There were a lot of women in there who were also Jews, but they had not revealed to everybody that they were Jews. So here they are now afraid that once the others knew that they were Jews, they were going to be slaughtered. But Esther is now the queen, and Esther is a Jew. So is Esther going to reveal herself to the king to have him alter this law? Is she going to encourage him to alter the law because she's also a Jew, she's identifying with her people? Or is she going to continue to not say she's a Jew, to pretend to not be a Jew so that she could save her own skin? We don't know yet. We are going to continue reading to find out. We are going to be reading the book of Esther, chapter 4. This will help us find out what Esther is going to say to the king Ahasuerus. Come along with us, guys. Welcome into the live, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming in, for joining us in our morning live. We are reading this morning the book of Esther. Esther chapter 4. When Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes and put on sackcloth with ashes, and went out into the midst of the city, and cried with a loud voice, a loud and bitter cry, and came even before the king's gate. For none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. And in every province, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, and fasting, and weeping, and wailing. And many lay in sackcloth and ashes. So can you imagine if the king send out a law that says every single Jew needs to be killed? Can you imagine the weeping and the wailing and the gnashing of teeth? Everybody believe that they are next. Imagine, I couldn't imagine that. It's like you hear of some kind of an ethnic cleansing where they're going to rid society of a particular group of people. So everybody in that group is nervous, anxious, worried that their house is the next house that's going to be attacked, and they are going to be slaughtered and the house burnt down. Can you imagine living in that fear? I can't. But let's continue reading and see what happens. So Esther's maids and her chamberlains came and told her. Then was the queen exceedingly grieved. So Esther was very angry. And she sent raiment to clothe Mordecai, and to take away sackcloth from him, but he received it not. Then called Esther to Attash, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend unto her. So Attash was 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 Esther's one of Esther's attendants, and gave him a commandment to Mordecai to know what it was and why it was. So Attash went forth to Mordecai unto the street of the city, which was before the king's gate. And Mordecai told him of all that had happened unto him, and of the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasuries for the Jews to destroy them. Also, he gave him the copy of the writing of the decree that was given at Shushan to destroy them, to show it unto Esther, and to declare it unto her, and to charge her that she should go in unto the king to make supplication unto him, and to make request before him for her people. And Attash came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Again Esther spoke unto Attash, and gave him commandment unto Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come in unto the king these 30 days. And they told to Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai commanded to ask Esther, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. So here Mordecai is communicating with Esther through the servant, and he is saying to Esther, this is what is happening out here to the Jews. The king, you are in the king's house, and the king has ordered that all the Jews be slaughtered. Come on, use your position to petition for the Jews. Don't just stay there and in your own protective cocoon because you are so close to the king. Use your influence to benefit your people. Verse 14. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Then Esther bade them return Mordecai this answer. Go, gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night and day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. So here, Esther is willing to die for her people. She said, listen, we're going to fast for 3 days and 3 nights. And I'm going to go into the king and ask about this law. I am going to go into the king and petition for my people. I am going to let him know that I am a Jew. And I do not approve of this slaughtering of my people. If he chooses to slaughter me because I'm a Jew, then so be it. But I am willing to go in to him on behalf of my people. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. This is the end of chapter 4. Oops. This is the end of chapter 4 of the book of Esther. I want to say thanks to everybody who have come into the live this morning. I was always told that Esther, my mom always say, you should read the book of Esther. You should read the book of Esther. Esther is a very good book. But, you know, I hadn't read it. I told you all that when I was in my late teens and trying to discover myself, I had read the Bible in its entirety back then, but that reading, I was in a different mindset when I read it back then. Reading it now makes so much more sense. It is so different. The societal atmosphere has changed in regards to the Bible. I am more learned. I have read more books. I have had different thoughts, additional thoughts to what I had at 19 years old. And so I come into reading the Bible with a different perspective. And so it makes more sense to me now. I believe when I read the Bible by myself back when I was 19, I think I just read it. I just read it just to say I read it. I didn't stop to think about what I was reading or the meaning of it, or made notes and stuff like that. I just read the Bible because I just like reading and calling words. But now it has a lot of significance for me. That's why I'm reading it with such diligence. All right. And even though I've read this up to chapter 4, guys, I really do feel like we should read some more this morning. The book of Esther has only 10 chapters, So I just feel like we could read some more. What do you all think? What do you all think? Because this story is rather interesting. So I think we can read some more. So we're going to continue reading the book of Esther. Let's go back from verse 15 of chapter 4. Then Esther bade them return Mordecai this answer: Go, gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Now it came to pass on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal clothes and stood in the inner court of the king's house, over against the king's house. And the king sat upon his royal throne in the royal house, over against the gate of the house. And it was so, when the king saw Esther the queen standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter. Then said the king unto her, What wilt thou, Queen Esther? And what is thy request? It shall be even given thee to the half of the kingdom. And Esther answered, If it seem good unto the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him. Then the king said, cause a man to make haste, that he may do as Esther had said. So the king and a man came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. And the king said unto Esther at the banquet of wine, what is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? Even to the half of the kingdom it shall be performed. Then answered Esther and said, my petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition and to perform my request, let the king and a man come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow as the king hath said. Then went Aman forth that day joyful and with a glad heart. But when Aman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up, nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Aman refrained himself, and when he came home, he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh, his wife. And Aman told them of the glory of his riches, and the multitude of his children, and all the things wherein the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the princes and servants of the king. Aman said, moreover, yea, Esther the queen did let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared, but myself. Let's read that again. Haman said, moreover, yea, Esther the queen did let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared, but myself. So him proud of himself, him say Esther invite him. No other man in with the king but him. And tomorrow am I invited unto her also with the king. Yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. You see how people can be hateful? You see how people can be hateful? Unnecessarily hateful? So here Aman is proud of himself that Queen Esther has invited him to come and feast with her and the king. But at the same time, he is so concerned that Mordecai is not bowing to him. Like, get on with yourself. Get on with yourself, Aman. Get on with yourself. He says, not even the fact that Queen Esther has invited him don't delight him as much as he's angry that Mordecai has not bowed to him. Verse 13 of chapter 5 says, yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Then said Zeresh his wife and all his friends unto him, let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak thou unto the king, that Mordecai may be hanged on this gallows, this 50 cubit high gallows. Then go thou in merrily with the king unto the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be built. You see the love of power? Him caused the gallows to be built for Mordecai because Mordecai dared to refuse to bow to him. And for that, him want to hang the man. Curtian says, thank you, Trevor. I appreciate you for what you are doing. I thank you, my love. I thank you for appreciating me. I thank you and everybody else who comes here into the live to listen to the reading of the Bible. I sincerely, you don't know how much I appreciate you all. I sincerely appreciate you all, my love. Thank you so much for coming. And guys, let me tell you this. I get so anxious when I start reading a good story. You all know that. You all know when I'm reading a good story. I get so super excited I can't even hold on to myself. And here I am again. Super excited. Super excited about reading the book of Esther. And here we have read chapter 5, which is rather interesting. And while we are at it, why not? Why not? Let's read chapter 6 as well. Chapter 6 of the book of Esther. Now, when I'm finished, I'm going to have to change the title of the live, because we're reading more than we had planned to originally. But we are going to be reading anyway. On that night, this is chapter 6 now. Haman has already made the gallows ready for Mordecai to be hanged. He's going in to go sit and eat with Esther and the king. And then when he comes out, he's going to order the people to hang Mordecai, because Mordecai don't bow to him. Chapter 6. On that night, could not the king sleep? The king couldn't sleep. The king tormented. And he commanded to bring the book of records of the chronicles. And they were read before the king. So you see, when this event was happening, the book of Chronicles was already written. So now, the king, King Ahasuerus is the king we are talking about here. He now has called for the book of Chronicles. He wants to read it. And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh. Now, don't forget, Bigthana and Teresh were the ones that Mordecai had told them about, and they were plotting. Bigthana and Teresh, for those of you who are just coming into the live, let me just bring you up to speed. So this Bigthana and Teresh were the two servants who were plotting to hurt the king. And Mordecai had heard about the plot, and he had told it to Esther that this was the plot. And Esther had told it to the king that Mordecai had told her that these two people were planning to harm him. And so the king had ordered their execution. So here now in verse 2, and it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's chamberlains, the keepers of the doors, who sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And the king said, what honor and dignity hath been done to Mordecai for this? Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, there is nothing done for him. So you all get what's going on there. So Mordecai had told the king, had told Esther what these two people had been planning to harm the king. And Esther, having had told the king what Mordecai had sent to tell her, caused the king's life to be spared, because he was able to know the plot of the enemy, and so he eliminated the enemies. So now that Haman has prepared this gallows for Mordecai, the king was tormented about it. King Ahasuerus, he was tormented about what Haman was planning for Mordecai. And so after he read the book, that the chronicles that told of Mordecai having helped to spare his life, he thought, for somebody to have done so much for me, what can I do for them? And he was told, well, you haven't done anything for him yet. Let's see. what, if anything, King Ahasuerus is going to do to stop the execution of Mordecai. Verse 4. And the king said, who is in the court? Now a man was come into the outward court of the king's house to speak unto the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. And the king's servants said unto him, behold, a man stands in the court. And the king said, let him come in. So a man came in, and the king said unto him, what shall be done unto the man whom the king delighted to honor? Now a man thought in his heart, to whom would the king delight to do honor more than to myself? You see that? A man is thinking he is the only one who deserves the king's honor. So which other man could the king be talking about but him? And a man answered the king, for the man whom the king delighted to honor. Let the royal apparel be brought, which the king used to wear, and the horse that the king rides upon, and the crown royal which is set upon his head. Excuse me. And let this apparel and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man withal, whom the king delighted to honor, and bring him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delighted to honor. So here, King Ahasuerus is saying all that he wants to be done to this person who he's going to be honoring. He wants a person to ride on his horse, to wear his old royal clothes, and to wear his old crown on his head. The crown that the king used to wear, put it on this man's head. The clothes the king used to wear, let this man wear this clothes. And the horse that the king used to ride, let this person ride it. And then you will see who it is that I am going to be honoring. Verse 10. Then the king said to Aman, make haste, that means hurry up, and take the apparel and the horse, as thou hast said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew that sits at the king's gate. Let nothing fall of all that thou hast spoken. Can you imagine Haman's face? Can you imagine the look on his face when he realized that the king is getting ready to honor Mordecai, and he who is planning to slaughter Mordecai has to bring the clothes and the robe and the horse and the crown to Mordecai? OMG. Verse 11. Then took Aman the apparel and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and brought him on horseback through the streets of the city, and proclaimed before him, thus shall it be done unto the man whom the king delighted to honor. And Mordecai came again to the king's gate, but Aman hasted to his house mourning, and having his head covered. Oh. So a man had to put his tail between his legs. He had to put his tail between his legs and cover his head, and return home. Oh my God, can you imagine that? You hate somebody so much, you decide that you're going to kill them. I don't know even why I use that word, because YouTube. You decide you are going to slay them, and here the king give you the robe, the crown, and the horse to deliver to this person. You can imagine how a man shame. I can imagine how embarrassing that had to be for him. So he covered his head and went home. And a man told Zeresh his wife, and a man told Zeresh his wife and all his friends everything that had befallen him. Then said his wise men and Zeresh, then said his wise men and Zeresh his wife. This is so funny. It's like the tables turn on the enemy. Oh, God, God. Oh, good morning, ma'am. Oh, I should say unalive. Okay, unalive. Okay. May I have to read this again? Verse 12. And Mordecai came again to the king's gate, but a man hasted to his house mourning and having his head covered. Verse 13. And the man told Zeresh his wife and all his friends everything that had befallen him. Then said his wise men and Zeresh his wife unto him, if Mordecai be of the seed of the Jews, before whom thou hast begun to fall, thou shalt not prevail against him, but shalt surely fall before him. Oh my God. And while they were yet talking with him, came the king's chamberlains, and hasted to bring Haman unto the banquet that Esther had prepared. So them have to come pick up Haman to bring him to the banquet. Haman couldn't go to the banquet because him so shame. Mordecai is going to be at the banquet, well dressed in priestly robes. The same man who he had planned to slaughter because the man didn't bow to him. Like, who the heck are you? Go sit on one side. But oh my God. Help me, Jesus. That was so funny. That was so funny. I don't want to stop reading this book. It is too funny. All right, guys, we're going to continue reading. We're not going to stop. Let us continue reading. We have time. Verse 7. No, chapter 7. Because I want to know what happened when a man went into the queen's banquet, and I don't want to wait. Confuse the enemy. God say, yeah, God will confuse the enemy. Yes, sister. The enemy is very well confused right here. Let us continue reading, guys. Chapter 7. And we are reading from the book of Esther. So the king and the man came to banquet with Esther the queen. And the king said again unto Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine, what is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted to thee. And what is thy request? And it shall be performed, even to the half of the kingdom. Then Esther the queen answered and said, if I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we had been sold for bondsmen and bondswomen, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. Then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther the queen, who is he, and where is he, that does presume in his heart to do so? And Esther said, the adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Aman was afraid before the king and the queen. Oh my gosh. Called him out. Esther called him out right there in front of the king. Verse 7. And the king, arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath, went into the palace garden. And Aman stood up to make requests for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. So Aman realized now that he's not in favor. The king is not in favor with him anymore after having heard that he had proclaimed to slaughter all the Jews, and he had created this gallows for Mordecai. He's right there in front of the enemy is right here in front of Esther, right here dining with the king. Verse 8. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the place of the banquet of wine, and a man was fallen upon the bed whereon Esther was. Then said the king, then in the banquet they have one bed? Who have one bed in a banquet hall? Anywho, I'm just reading. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the place of the banquet of wine, and a man was fallen upon the bed whereon Esther was. Then said the king, will he force the queen also before me in the house? As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. And Arbana, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, hang him thereon. OMG. OMG. Sister Winsome. Sister Winsome. Good morning, my love. Good morning. God, you know the Bible is so interesting. When you're having a banquet, where one bed come from in a banquet? Mighty God. We have to read right there so again, because it's funny. Verse 8 of chapter 7, guys, of the book of Esther. Then the king returned out of the garden. Now the king had gone into the garden after Esther told him that Haman was the enemy. Haman was the one who had was the one who was plotting to unalive all the Jews. And Haman was standing right there, ready to having in the banquet to eat and feast with the king. Then the king returned out of the garden into the place of the banquet of wine, and Haman was fallen upon the bed whereon Esther was. Then said the king, will he force the queen also before me in the house? The king said, why am I trying to do? Why am I drop on the bed? I rape him, one rape Esther? As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. And Arbana, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good for the king, stands in the house of Haman. Then the king said, hang him on it. So they hung the man on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's anger pacified. Oh Lord Jesus. Only that satisfied my people, I know. And I see it all throughout the Bible we've been reading. The only thing that pacifies these people when they are angry is the unaliving of the person who make them angry. How kind of society that, man? No forgiveness, no chasing out, because you see, the thing is, they took enemy standing very seriously. If you are my enemy, the best thing to do is to weed you out, not just cast you out, but weed you out, so that you cannot continue to perpetrate your hatred towards me. I have to take you out. There was no forgiveness. There was no, sir. I mean, there's too much forgiveness going on here. So everything is death before dishonor. You ever wonder where that term come from? I must out of the Bible it come from. Death before dishonor. But anyway, welcome, Sister Winsome. How you doing? Happy Wednesday morning to you, my love. It is Wednesday, Hump Day. Those of you who are able to participate in Hump Day, participate for us. Anywho, we are going to continue. Welcome into the live, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming. We are reading the book of Esther. Very, very, very interesting. We just finished reading chapter 7, where Haman has been sent to the gallows, the same gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. And it's so interesting. We are going to continue. The book of Esther has only 10 chapters, and it looks like we're going to read all those 10 chapters. We're going to read those 10 chapters today because it is so interesting. Verse 8. On that day did the king Ahasuerus give the house of a man, the Jews' enemy, unto Esther the queen. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was unto her. Now remember that Esther was in fact Mordecai's cousin. She was the daughter of Mordecai's uncle. But her parents had died, so Mordecai had taken her and raised her as his own daughter. Let's start again with chapter 8. On that day did the king Ahasuerus give the house of Haman, the Jews' enemy, unto Esther the queen. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was unto her. And the king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it unto Mordecai. Because remember, the king had given Haman one of his rings earlier. So now the king had taken back the ring from Haman and give it to Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. And Esther spake yet again before the king, and fell down at his feet, and besought him with tears to put away the mischief of Haman the Agagite, and his device that he had devised against the Jews. So here Queen Esther is begging the king to, God says, be careful what you wish for others. Exactly. When you're digging, dig two. One for the person you're digging it for, and one for yourself, because you never know. You might very well fall into that pit. So here, Haman got sent to the gallows, the same gallows that he had built for Mordecai. And now here, Mordecai has now arisen to the position that Haman had. Because Esther, being queen, is petitioning to the king on Mordecai's behalf and on the behalf of all the Jews around, because the law now still exists that all the Jews should be unalived. So now Esther is petitioning to the king. Say, listen, these are my people. You need to do something about this law to spare my people. Verse 4. Then the king held out the golden scepter towards Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king and said, if it please the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and one thing seem right before the king, and I be pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to reverse the letters devised by Ammon, the son of Ammedatha, the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews which are in all the king's provinces. Verse 6. For how can I endure to see the evil that shall come unto my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred? Welcome into the live, guys. Thank you all so much for coming, guys. Thank you all so much for coming. Don't forget that the like button is yours to hit. If you want to hit something today, hit that like button. Oh my gosh. So here now, Esther is pleading with the king to reverse this law. Remember, Ammon was the one who suggested this law to unalive all the Jews. Now Esther is petitioning to the king not to have this law carried out, but to reverse it, to strike down this law. Verse 7. Then the king Ahasuerus said unto Esther the queen, and to Mordecai the Jew, behold, I have given Esther the house of Ammon, and him they have hanged upon the gallows, because he laid his hand upon the Jews. Write ye also for the Jews, as it liketh you, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring. For the writing which is written in the king's name, and sealed with the king's ring, may no man reverse. So here the king says to Esther, listen, everything over which Ammon was in charge, I'm handing it over to you, Esther, and Mordecai. I'm giving you this ring. This is the king's ring, and this ring represents a seal of approval by the king. So write whatever laws you want to write for the Jews. The two of you go ahead and write it and seal it with my ring, because once the seal of my ring is upon it, it cannot be changed. And we are going to distribute these laws among all the provinces around here. Verse 9. Then were the king's scribes called at that time in the 3rd month, that is the month of Sivan. On the 3, it's not, that is so strange. On the 3 and 20, it's written so funny. But anyway, let us read that again, chapter 9. Then were the king's scribes called at that time in the 3rd month, that is the month of Sivan, on the 23rd day of Sivan, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded unto the Jews, and to the lieutenants, and the deputies, and the rulers of the provinces, which are from India unto Ethiopia, 127. Can you imagine? 127 provinces, unto every province according to the writing thereof, and unto every people after their language, and to the Jews according to their writing, and according to their language. Okay, so Queen Esther and Mordecai wrote all these laws for the Jews and how the Jews should be treated. They sealed it with the ring of Ahasuerus and had it distributed among the 127, I believe, among the 127 provinces over which King Cyrus ruled, and everybody near and far now were to be made aware of these new laws pertaining to the Jews. AG! Oh, you can't say the only thing she wants to eat is the Mega Million. Only thing you want to hit is the Mega Million. Well, if you don't have a ticket, you don't have a chance. I mean, when you have a ticket, so you have a chance. Good morning, AG. How are you doing, my love? Good to see you. Good to see you. I mean, I think we did see you at the beginning, AG. You know, you first come tell me good morning. Oh, I did earlier. Oh, yeah. Then I when we did see you recently, make it sound so like I've seen you sometime earlier. Let us continue. Verse 10 of chapter 8. And he wrote in the King Ahasuerus' name and sealed it with the king's ring, and sent letters by post on horsemen and riders on mules, camels, and young dromedaries, wherein the king granted the Jews which were in every city to gather themselves together and to stand for their life, to destroy, to slay, and to cause to perish all the power of the people and province that would assault them, both little ones and women, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. So look at this. They have kind of turned the tables. The tables have been turned. So instead of the law that Aman wrote to destroy all the Jews, here now is the law for the Jews to destroy everybody and take their spoils. Ain't that something? Ah, boy. Let us continue. Verse 12. Upon one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, namely upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, the copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, and that the Jews should be ready against that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. So the post that rode upon mules and camels went out, being hastened and pressed on by the king's commandment, and the decree was given at Shushan the palace. And Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal apparel of blue and white, and with a great crown of gold, and with a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. The Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. And in every province and in every city, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a good day. And many of the people of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews fell upon them. Imagine that. But I didn't know that you could just become a Jew. But here, a lot of people were suddenly being, I guess, quote unquote, converted to Judaism because they did not want this new law to negatively impact them, because this law was meant to negatively impact everybody who was not a Jew. And so when people did not want it to impact them negatively, they just converted to Judaism. AG, what's up? What are you doing? Now we are on to chapter 9. Should we read it? Now, I'm going to leave the suspense. I'm going to leave a little bit of suspense for tomorrow morning. Chapters 9 and 10. We will read chapters 9 and 10 tomorrow morning. Yeah. We gotta leave a little bit of suspense because we gotta talk a little bit. We gotta talk a little bit about this book of Esther here. Short and spicy, a nice and short little story that is so powerful, more powerful than some of the chapters we have read that have had many more chapters. I mean, books that we have read that have had many more chapters where we're reading, and more than 80% of it we don't even remember. The book of Esther is so compact with this beautiful story that you cannot forget it. Here, Esther, having found favor with the king, having been crowned queen over Vashti the defiant one. Esther having been crowned queen in replacement to Vashti, has used her influence, her closeness to the king, to help her people. And that is what we see happening all the time. Like when somebody is close to the people in power, the people in authority, they pass laws in favors of their friends and families and their special interests, forgetting about the other people. Well, here, Esther has used her influence in a positive way for helping out, in a positive way to help out her people, the Jews. And there's also doing to others as you would have them do to you. And also, when you dig a pit for someone to dig to, because a man, thinking that he was all so mighty and powerful and he was very close to the king, he believed that he was so close to the king that he believed that he was entitled to the same kind of royal treatment as the king. So he wanted people to bow to him. And because Mordecai refused to bow to him, he used his influence on the king, his closeness, his proximity to the king, to get this law to be passed that people should bow to him. And if they did not bow to him, they should be slaughtered. They should be unalived, so to speak. And all the Jews tried to influence the king into believing that all the Jews, they will conspire against him. They will cause problems. They will start social upheavals and cause problems for him. So he wanted them eradicated. But here it comes that he ended up being the one who was hung. And even his clothes were given to Mordecai. Everything that he ruled over, Esther and Mordecai were now appointed to rule over it, to make the decisions. So instead of the king just sitting there and making decisions on his own, he gave Esther and Mordecai the permission to write all the laws that they want to be passed in beneficial to the Jews. And boy, did they went a writing. Did they write all these laws that they knew the Jews would benefit from, because the Jews are their people. How many times you see when you see politicians make laws and you say, but this law is not for the people. This law is for their rich friends. Look when they make tax laws for everybody to pay the same amount of tax. That can't be right. If you make $100,000 for the year, and you have to, if they say, well, everybody has to pay $5,000 a year for taxes, everybody got to pay $5,000, and you make $100,000, you are paying $5,000 out of it, you are left with 95. I make $20,000 and I pay 5 out of it, I'm left with 15. How could that be fair? That can't be fair. That can't be right. But you see, when they make laws like this, they don't want their friends. It is to appease themselves and their friends, because they know their friends are making big money. So if they say that everybody, or the people who make 100,000, they are going to be paying 50%, and the people who make 10,000, they are going to be paying 5%. They know that their rich friends will get mad at them, so they don't want that. So they make laws to appease themselves and their special interests and their rich friends. That is true. And that is why there's always so much conflict and so much division. And the people are always, the masses are always left out, because rich people, people in authority, people in power, they make laws that will benefit them, and laws that the poor people will have to adhere to, or else. Their rich friends don't have to adhere to it, because their proximity to authority will ensure that they don't get prosecuted, but not the little man. We can't dare try such a stunt. So here, Esther and Mordecai has been given the uncharted privilege of writing the laws that will benefit the Jews. And these laws are being sent throughout all 120 provinces over which Ahasuerus was king. When we come back tomorrow, we will continue and end the book of Esther. We will read chapters 9 and 10 in the book of Esther when we come back tomorrow. And let's see what else is happening around the region where the Jews are concerned. Now, once again, I want to say thanks to everybody who came into the live. Guys, if you did not hit the like button coming in, please hit the like button on your way out. If you are new here and you have not yet subscribed to the channel, now is a great time to do so. I want to say thanks to each and every one of the 4,000 people who have subscribed to my channel. I sincerely appreciate you all. I want to say thank you so much. And to my faithful travelers, AG, Card, Andrea, Winsome, Joseph, Arely, Yard Foods, Mike, Ricky, I can't even possibly remember every single person. Whitney, Modest, so many of y'all. If I start calling name, I'll never stop for the rest of the day. I'll just be calling name, calling. Courtian, Bridazell. There are so many people who religiously comes into the live, and oh God, oh, me nearly forget you. Oh, could I? Yeah. Oh my God. Yes. I sincerely appreciate you all, and I thank you all so much for your love and your continuous support to my little channel. I appreciate it. And I want to say thanks again, everybody. I hope everybody have a great Wednesday wherever you are, whatever you're going to be doing. Please be safe, because these streets out there are not safe. So please take extra precautions to ensure that you are safe. And come back here and join me later for live, and tomorrow morning for the continuation of the Bible. And later tonight, we'll continue reading the book Tuesdays with Maury. I hope you all are enjoying that book as well, because I certainly am enjoying it, and I'm enjoying the parts of the Bible where we are at as well. So thanks again, everybody, for coming, and I hope you all have yourself a great day. Whatever you do, guys, be safe. All right, and that is going to be it from me for this morning. Until next time, my friends, this is Trev from Trevessence, where your journey matters. Have a great day, everybody.